Welcome to the Board Game Snobs podcast. Critically harsh reviews with a touch of class.
Go, Jerry.
Howdy-ho, listeners. You've stepped into the greatest podcast about board games that doesn't just talk about board games. This is the Board Game Snobs, and I'm the star of the show, Jerry. And
Is
with
that a tinkle I hear in a glass over there?
what? Yeah, I'm drinking my Metamucil.
Gotta stay regular. Been having trouble lately?
Me? No, I do a lot of fiber, a lot of bran, and I drink a lot of water. So I had.
Do you mix anything in with that Metamucil?
Vodka and prune juice, man. You got to try it. I'm serious. No. Legitly, I do not. I do not like vodka at all. I think people who drink vodka are lowlives. Snap. There you go. It's called gin.
You just insulted all the 21-year-old
there's
dieting.
There's a lot of 21-year-old Russians in their tracksuits right now,
housewives.
really mad. Yeah, the suburban housewives. No, I just don't like vodka. Vodka just exists and makes things alcoholic. Gin's what you're looking for.
It's like the it's like the cranberry of alcoholic drinks.
Yeah.
You got a Coke, put a little vodka in it. You got an orange juice, put a little vodka in it. You got a screwdriver.
Well, my dad, the only hard liquor that he drank was really vodka, which I never could understand why. And then one day I caught him drinking concentrated prune juice and vodka. And I said, I said, Dad, you're losing your mind. He's like, no, this is good and it cleans you out. And I thought, what in the world? Anyways, I gave it a shot and it's not bad. It's not bad at all.
There's an old Brian Regan skit where he's talking about cranberry. He's like, man, the salesman on cranberry must really be out there doing his job. He's like, grape, put a little cranberry in a cran grape. Banana, put a cranberry in a cran banana.
Well, cranberries, I mean, who eats cranberries?
Nobody. They're disgusting.
But they're in everything.
They are. And they flavor it. They give a little tartness to everything.
Just like you. And you're the host. What's your name? Gobby? That's right.
Hi, this is the host, Gobby. I was thinking, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said
You were
name.
thinking?
I was thinking. I was just sitting here thinking. We might ought to do every now and then do a reset.
What does that mean?
If somebody tunes in, the last time we actually described who we are, what we do, what the show's about, is probably the first episode.
Yeah.
I think we kind of did that like maybe episode, I don't know, 20 or 30 somewhere. But just every now and then, like say, we're called the Board Game Snobs because why? This podcast is about what?
Oh, so that's what you're wanting to do.
Like, I'm Gobby. I'm the host of the show, the foundation, the rock that it sits on. When all else goes awry, I'll be here editing, making things right. Bringing in people when Jerry can't host with me because his life is ridiculously busy.
And I'm just the star of the show.
You're the star of the show.
I'm the good-looking, funny.
I'm the heart of the show.
One. Right here, I'll tell you.
Jerry's the snarky one with attitude. So if we're like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I'm the Leon. No, let's see. I would be.
I'm a mixture.
Probably more Raphael.
I'm a mixture of Donatello and Leonardo.
And I'm a mixture of Michelangelo and Raphael.
No, you're the
Cowabunga, dude.
What was the pig with the sunglasses?
I do love some pizza.
Oh, you do love.
Rocksteady.
Have you?
I think.
Have you? Oh yeah. Have you watched the new CGI Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Michael Bay thing? Did you watch that?
I watched the first one.
I haven't watched any of it, but the other day, for some reason, it was like it showed up in like my feed, like it was like my Google thing, something about it, and I looked at it and was just appalled. The turtles look awful.
It was pretty bad looking.
Yeah, they do not. They look like a horror film thing. They look like the Toxic Avenger. Do you remember the Toxic Avenger?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they look like. They legitimately look like they were just turtles that fell in a vat of acid, and that's what came out.
Well, I mean, they, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
So this
So go ahead.
Okay.
What is our podcast about? Why are we called the Board Game Snobs, Jerry?
Well, it's because we hate
Go on.
everything. We absolutely hate everything about board games, except there's a few out there that are actually pretty good. And we really discourage people from buying a lot of board games. We really just want you to buy a few good ones. And that's really what this podcast is about. Plus the fact...
Well, I remember you said you want to offer restraint.
Yes, restraint.
To the hype.
I am into restraint. That sounds bad. This is a PG podcast.
This is a family show. That's something else you should know.
This is a family show. Plus, Gabi does a lot of editing because I have a minor tick where I tend to spout off some really harsh things. And so, yeah.
Very bad things.
There's heavy editing. That's what this podcast is about. Board games and heavy editing.
We should have just called it Heavy Editing, the podcast.
Yes. We actually... wait a minute. Before I move on, did you have banter that you wanted to use, or did you want to stick to the topic?
Are we done with the reset? Is that it? Is there anything else? Maybe
let's see.
new listeners.
Let's
you know,
see.
we get a lot of
Nude listeners.
We get a lot of nude listeners. We're big in the nude colonies.
Yeah, I think a lot of people enjoy it. And really, what do you think? If you were in a nudist colony, what board games would you be playing? There's a topic. It wouldn't be any.
Clearly,
it wouldn't be any dexterity games.
Clearly, it's Twister.
No,
right?
No, that's weird. That's what you
Isn't
would
that the one
assume.
everybody-
But most
Of all the TV show, the movies I've watched from the 80s, they played Twister.
everybody Twister's just no, that's not the game they're playing. And everybody knows that nudists have transcended physical. Just they've transcended the physical, the material. They're all intellectual, so they would be playing something highly refined like Tricarion or Anachrony or something like that.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead. You're the host. You can ask questions. I mean, we just started that over.
Let me rephrase. I'm fixing to ask a question.
I'm fixing the answer.
What's with nudist colonies? Is that just people that want to be free, not constrained by clothes?
I think I don't know. I went to Mexico once and was on a beach and stayed in a resort that was adults only, which I didn't realize that at the time. And so what I found is that
you went onto a porn shoot.
No. This was like on my honeymoon, and I noticed that
Did you hear any saxophone music in the background?
Kenny G playing softly everywhere you go. I found that the people who engaged in nudity were, I'm trying not to offend anybody, the least physical. Let's say that they have not been to the they had not been to the gym recently. They were cellulite rich.
I think that's the way it goes sometimes. It's like, well, that's just the old thing. It's like, you know, the old movies are like, oh, yeah, we're going to go to nudist colonies, a bunch of hot people. But it's like, no, it's generally a certain, like you said, they're possibly older. Things not in the places they used to be.
I think nude beaches are a big thing in Australia. I'll put that out. I'll put that out there for Australian listeners. Email us at boardgamesnobs@gmail.com if you have any.
Let's see, Michael Langford, Troy. Haven't heard from Troy in a while. Okay, I have sent our conference link to Bubba, and he keeps asking me for it. I'm like, I've sent it. I don't know what else to do.
Is Bubba trying to get on the podcast?
He's trying to get on the podcast.
Are we starting over to... I will engage also that Bubba is...
Wait. I see a Stanley popping up. There he is.
And to restart also, since we've restarted already, is that Bubba is also a friend of the show, our executive producer, our Dick Wolf, so to speak, of this Law and Order.
I don't think so.
Yes. We run all of our ideas past Bubba. So if you have any problems with any of the topics we talk about, you just need to write Bubba. Bubba, what's your email? No,
he's our HR department.
He's our HR department.
Oh, man.
Legal counsel. He's everything.
So let's introduce Bubba.
I just
Since
did.
we've reset.
He did.
Again.
Okay, it's Bubba. What else is there to know?
People have heard of Bubba, but you got to think every now and then, Jerry, we get new listeners.
But everybody knows Bubba.
It's presumptuous of you to just assume people should just come onto the show and know what's what.
They should.
Is it the idea that they should have already listened to the other shows?
Mm-hmm.
I guess so, but lots of people, they listen to the one and then they work their way backwards. Hardly anybody starts with the first episode.
That's true.
That was terrible.
That's true.
The first episode was not that bad. Although in the very first episode, in that episode alone, Jerry, you went from loving first Martians to immediately redacting your statement.
Yes. Everybody figured out right there. That's when I was really honing my skills as a board game connoisseur.
So, all right. Well, since Bubba has just joined us, Bubba, what you been up to? Anything? Anything at all?
I played board games with you guys. I mean, I did that. I mean, is that you talking about significant things? I mean, I do a lot, but anything significant?
Oh, what do you do? What do you do that's so significant?
I mean, the last time you asked me, I think it's a little this, a little that. a little dabble.
The vaguest of answers.
A little dabble, a little spruce.
That's those trees.
You really want to know something about me that's significant? I have termites in my house, and that has consumed me. For the last week and a half, I have spent...
And your wood.
Yes, in my wood. Yeah, see how I use that right there?
Are you made of wood? They're consuming me.
They're consuming me.
I smell of rich mahogany.
Is your name Kalijah?
It's a dangerous thing. You know how you have ants on you and you feel it, you see one ant and then you get ants all on you and you feel like you have some ant disease suddenly and you're scratching everywhere? Imagine if you're anticipating that in your house.
Ant disease. Is that
psoriasis of the house?
Yeah, psoriasis
an ant
of the
disease?
House.
Isn't that a disease your dad's sister gets?
Your aunt's disease? I guess so.
That's called diabetes.
Can't stop her. I have the aunt's disease. I just can't stop scratching it.
I pause for laughter. Bubba was with us.
I got
when we played Pan Am.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about Pan Am?
I would like to talk about Pan Am before we move on to our topic, since we've spent literally like the first 10 minutes of this podcast just rambling.
I missed the whole nude beaches
point of the show.
Point, by the way.
The nude beaches?
Just want to say that.
There's not many points on the nude beaches.
Oh, okay.
From what we can
I pulled out like a Seinfeld episode that I barely remembered, and I remembered it, and I was very proud of myself. Other than that, we can move on. I apologize.
Pan Am.
Pan Am. Go.
A game from the Funko people, the people who bring you Funko Pop, so you know it,
And Prospero Hall.
And Prospero Hall. Yes. So
Prospero. Like, I was looking for a designer, like the name of the guy on the box, and I was like, it's designed by Prospero Hall.
I tried to look him up. That's not a person. There is no Prospero Hall.
Mr. Prospero?
I thought it was Arsenio's brother.
Arsenio and Prospero.
Oh, wow.
Was that
One's
good?
a late night host. One's a board game designer.
Oh, wow.
I'm on a roll. I'm sure our listeners remember Arsenio.
I'm on a biscuit.
So Pan Am, wow, man, I know my thoughts about it. One, I'm very puzzled that it came out at Target and other places and not like your friendly local game store kind of first. It's one of those games that kind of came out of nowhere. I hadn't heard anybody really advertising it. It wasn't on anybody's wish list. It just showed up. And the next thing I know, I'm seeing everybody on Facebook posting about it. And I'm like, should check this out. I'm into airlines. I like Airlines Europe. Airlines Europe's one of my favorite stock games. And Pan Am, I like it. I like it better. I like it better than American Airlines.
And that's the review.
That's it right there.
Man,
says it all.
Pan Am, I like it.
That right there should say something. As much as I hate on board games, the fact that
we're not anything but if not loquacious.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
Wax it on.
okay. So if you would like for me, give me 30 seconds of uninterrupted time, and I'll explain briefly what the game's about. 30 seconds.
Let me go use the bathroom.
Go use the bathroom. Everybody else just.
All right.
Okay, everybody, just close your eyes.
Continue. Although me using the bathroom and your explanations are pretty much synonymous. Oh, sick burn.
Just close your eyes and picture this. In Pan Am, it's good. You are basically utilizing your engineers as workers, and you're placing them out on these little areas. And you're either putting them out on tracks where you're bidding, and it's a very similar type of bidding like stockpile, where if I put it out on this spot, I bid 2, but if a person comes ahead of me and puts their little worker ahead of me, outbids me, then I have to remove my worker and put him somewhere else. So there's a little bit of bidding, a little bit of worker placements. And you're either putting out airports all over the world, you're buying other aircraft. The aircraft all have certain distances that they can go. You're purchasing landing rights, little route rights, so where that kind of like ticket to ride connect the various areas. And at the same time, you're managing your budget. And at the end of the round, after you've all kind of bid and produced and got all your stuff and your income, you can buy stock in Pan Am. Pan Am will expand from the center of the map outward, and they'll buy routes. And hopefully, if you happen to be in their path, they'll buy your route. You get bukus of money, and maybe their stock will go up, maybe their stock will go down, but you'll end up buying as much stock, and stock is victory points in the game. That's the quick version of it. And that little aspect of worker placement plus bidding plus resource management plus stock speculation was really good. It was very good, actually. The player interaction was well thought out. Other players building and claiming routes that you want, other players outbidding you, other players going where you need to go. Turn order made a difference. The scoring was very tight. All of the components are very serviceable. They're nice to look at. The rules were easy. It just all made sense.
Are you done yet?
I like it.
Oh, good. I came in just in time.
You threw it out there.
Well, we played it 4-player. I loved it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Bidding, route claiming. Is that a mechanism? Route claiming?
Yes.
I guess set collection with different locations. We played it 4-player. Great. Played it 3-player.
You didn't like it? You didn't like it 3-player?
It was good, but I can't. Let me just say, if you go to 4 to 3-player, I can't imagine this game at 2-player.
What changed?
Because the quality of the game is there. That did not change. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying the tenseness of the bidding actions was not there from 4 to 3. I rarely got outbid, but a few times. There's no like scaling. It doesn't scale well.
Well, it does scale in the fact that when you have less players, you have more workers, you have more engineers to bid with.
Yes, yes, that's true. But I don't know. It felt different. It felt much different to me at 3-player. Give me 4 players over 3, and at 2, I guess you would have your full allotment of 5 workers, and that's fine. But it's like you just have more options.
Can I propose this? You played this with 4 players, and of those 4 players, one of them was Enrique, who's known for purposely getting in people's way. And the other 2 players were the great strategic minds of myself and Bubba. Could it be that when you played it 3-player, you played it with people who are, let me think of the term, basic, such as,
no,
Mike and Crystal? Is that who you played it with?
Are you kidding me? Mike beats you at every game we play.
That doesn't mean anything. I'll let him win because he's basic.
You don't want to hurt his feelings.
No. When it comes to money and money management.
Oh, please. Go ahead.
I mean, it's basic just, Mike. I don't, to me, it's not that. The bidding wasn't as cutthroat. For whatever reason, even though we had an extra pawn apiece, it's like we all just ended up going to the routes at the bottom. Like the routes needed to have been scaled back, or the directives. Directives, is that what the ones on the bottom was?
Yeah.
They need to scale back somehow. They need to have like a little thing you put over where that like with so many players, these get taken away. Because, like, well, I don't really want to pay $2 more. But with 4 players, like, those get taken up quicker. And then you've got, like, I don't know. It was just much different to me at 3-player. Not a whole, well.
2-1.
Yeah. Crystal ended up winning.
What does that say?
Nothing. This says
Man, I don't know. I'm just asking a question. I don't know if that meant anything.
I mean, Crystal beat one at the last game. She's won like the last 3 games we played.
Oh wow.
That's embarrassing.
They're all about it.
Oh,
they're
yeah,
serious gamers.
Oh, yeah.
It's just my personal enjoyment with I don't know if it's the company I kept or what, but my personal enjoyment from 4-player to 3-player went down quite a bit.
You came in last again, didn't you?
All right, moving on.
Okay. But seriously, Pan Am.
Seriously,
the things that I like about it. So I'll give Gabi that caveat that perhaps this game plays better at 4 than 3.
Well, it's a bidding game. Most bidding games are better at the highest player count possible.
Well, okay. So it's not it's not a straightforward bidding game. It is a place your worker higher on the track. You pay more to remove this worker. So it's kind of like this bump out mechanic where you're willing to pay more to go to that spot.
Oh, the old Vital Lacerda bump out.
No, not really, because Vital just bumps you out. So with that bidding is part of the player interaction, and it's how much are you willing to pay for this spot. And so throughout our game, the 4-player game, there were several times where somebody would just max out the bid because they desperately need that spot for their plan. And that, coupled with the management of upgrading your planes or buying new planes, going here, getting routes, going here and getting more money, all of that was you had to manage that very, very well. And I enjoyed that because you're juggling all this. And I never felt like, out of the 7 rounds we played, I never felt like I had it all in the bag. Like I got to do what I sort of wanted to do, but it always left me hanging. Like I wish I had one more worker. I wish I had, you had to really think out what you were doing. Yeah, you always had that feel to it. And again, it sounds like to me, Gabi, that the people that you're playing with weren't really all about driving up the price. Because if you play with me, Bubba, and Enrique, we're going to drive up the prices on you on any bidding game. Bidding is our thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's probably true because it's like they want something cheap. Like they want the best bang for their buck. So, and they tend to play that way. So, like if I would outbid them, they would just go to another free spot. But that's part of the gameplay. That's what becomes available. That's what I'm saying. That's what becomes available in a 3-player game, and especially in a 2-player game. Like I want to play this 2-player just to see, because I honestly don't get me wrong. This may sound like negative on my part. I love this game. It was great. Even at 3-player, I loved it. But at 2-player, I would be really interested to see. I mean, it would just be a nonstop back and forth, and it would just be that interesting to me.
Well,
I wouldn't think.
I think that's a good critique. Bubba, what do you think?
I like the game. I was sitting here remembering. That's the one that I almost won in. So I think
I beat you by 1 point.
You beat me by 1 point. I think
that's on Bubba's gravestone. I almost won.
By the hair of my chinny chin chin. I think at first, the only thing I didn't like about it is I didn't understand when we started playing the game how the Pan Am worked when it came to like how it would how the airline would buy the routes out. I didn't know it started from 1 or 2 central points and then came out. Of course, after the first the turn, I understood immediately what it is, but I had started to build routes, that was going to be at the very end of that chain, and that made a difference. And so I only won that game, or I only came up in that game at the very end of it because I had done it. But it doesn't lend itself to a long-term play. Like I can't say, I'm going to play this, I'm going to max out in the last 2 rounds. It's very, very difficult to do that. But other than that, I had a blast with the game. I thought it was neat.
Along those lines, of course, did you mention in your explanation that the event cards, there's like multiples of each stage? because
we were
the one we had, like,
very, very
the stock stayed super low the whole time.
Yeah.
The one me and Mike and Crystal had, the stocks literally went up every turn. On the last turn, it was maxed out.
Oh, wow.
So it was complete. Like, I think Crystal won with like 12 stocks.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And y'all had 30 at the end of ours.
Yeah.
So significant gameplay difference among those event cards, which is good.
And I will say this. I don't like event cards in games. Like, most of the time, that's just randomness tacked onto a game. But in this game, the randomness, these event cards provide you. Yeah, it does. So all this various deck that you shuffle out,
Flies it.
It makes the stock go up or down, fluctuates between prices, but also determines how many times Pan Am will expand. And so it changes the strategy. And even in the expansion of Pan Am, you roll this dice, and on that dice are depicted certain airline routes, and that's the direction that they go. And so in our 4-player game, I just happened to build all around Miami, which is where Pan Am starts out with. Everybody else kind of went to Asia and Europe and built. I was forced to go down to South America and make routes, and lo and behold, that's where Pan Am expanded to. And then there's randomness there. In our game, it went south and west. What direction did it go in your 3-player game, Gabi? Do you recall?
It actually went west and north,
so
towards Europe.
So I like the fact that the game is that variable. Like, you don't know what the stock prices are going to be. You don't know if it's going to stay down. You don't know if it's going to go up. You have no clue really what's going to take place. So the board is the same, but the direction for whence this little monster that is Pan American expands out is different each game. And I just find
is that what AM stands for? American?
I think it is, isn't it, Bubba?
Pretty sure.
Bubba,
What does Pan stand for?
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan is American?
He's from Neverland. Yeah, Pan American World Airways is what it stands for.
Yeah.
Neverland, USA. That's where Michael Jackson lived too.
Please don't bring Michael into this.
So, speaking of which, I think that Pan...
Wait, just a second.
Are you
I had
looking
a
at
thought.
it? Oh, okay.
No, I had a thought. I'm trying to think of what it was exactly.
Was it about Michael Jackson or was it about Pan Am?
No, it was about Pan Am, actually.
Mm.
Oh, this is a game. Okay, Jerry, I know your pain. When I explain a game, oftentimes I will bring up a point, and then 6 rounds in, they declare I never brought up that point. And I'm
Right.
like, no, I brought it up. Believe me, I brought it up. So Crystal was like, see, when you were explaining the game, I didn't really understand. She said, you said something like to stay away from Miami. I said, no, you may not want to build an airport near Miami because very soon it will become obsolete, right? I mean, you want to place your airport in a spot where you can expand from that airport. But if you build it too close to where Pan Am's going to spread from, then after a couple plays, that airport becomes obsolete because that is where your flight paths go from.
Sound advice.
Sound advice.
Right. So,
Logic.
in this game is interesting because as opposed to Airlines Europe, as like you're wanting to put planes all over the map, or in most route building games where you're wanting to get your stuff out on the board, like my orange planes. I want to see orange planes all over the map. You might want that for a little bit, but ultimately you don't want that because you want Pan Am to take over your orange planes and send them back to you, giving you your money's worth. And that's an interesting concept to me, that sellback device mechanism, whatever you want to call it.
I thought about that after we played it. And so just to give the listeners a thought is that when you build a route, whatever the distance of that route, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, that's how much money it generates for you in the income round, $1, $2, $3, or $4. And so if Pan Am buys that route, depending on whether it's a 1, 2, or 3, or 4 route, you get a lot of money. You get more than what it generates each round. But there is some strategy in building a large route away from Pan Am so you have a steady income guaranteed for several turns, for several rounds. Unlike in my strategy, the first game we played, I tend to follow Pan Am. Pan Am was right behind me. I kept building routes out in front of it, and they were buying up. So I was getting an influx of cash suddenly, but my income each round was very low compared to the other players. And so everybody else was getting $10-$20 a round, and I'm just
everybody
getting
but
$5.
me.
Yeah.
No,
I got zero.
I spent my money. I was broke, and I was like, there has to be some mechanism by which I can still make money, and I'm broke. Remember that when I started out because I bought.
Well, the first round, Bubba went broke and,
I went
and
broke
couldn't figure out what's going on.
I bought a lot of planes, and I was like, there has to be some mechanism by which I can, recover. And I'm
nobody was wanting to get on a plane run by Bubba Airways. I mean, but after
making these unusual runs to Colombia.
Hey man, you know what I'm saying? I thought it was smart. I almost won.
They need to make like the dark web of Pan Am, where like you're making runs to Colombia, Miami,
Chicago.
Oh, really? Chicago?
Well, okay. Moving on. I realized I didn't want to explain that.
What's in Chicago?
Moving on.
So anyways, but I will say this:
you're smuggling in baseball players.
Yeah, that's it.
Cubs.
That's it.
That's exactly it. I love American Airlines Europe. It's one of my
I love American.
I love American. And so I mean that's basically what turns out to. Do you like this European airline game or do you like this American airline game? And I got to say that Airlines Europe is a great next step game. It's one of those games that when you first start,
you like Ticket to Ride, go Airlines Europe next. You like Airlines Europe, go Pan Am next.
Pan Am is a next step up, and Pan Am to me is a much better game. It's more engaging, and I think I don't want to say it killed Airlines Europe for me because I'd have to play them back to back.
Because there is the stocks in Airlines Europe that I'm always interested in. I'm always worried that somebody's going to get the stock I need or want.
Yeah, Airline Europe has that. I keep calling it Europe. Airlines Europe. You can tell I'm from the South. Has that nice little stock mechanic of the stocks in your hand and then having to play those stocks out front and kind of speculating on what somebody else is doing. I do like that. But yeah, Pan Am, if your group enjoys bidding and even the least bit of route building, I must say that Pan Am, it was a shock for me, and it's one of the better games I've played this year. It is a very nice production. It's really good.
Yeah.
The hype around it, what little hype there is legitimate.
I think it's starting to get out there on social media, from what I can see. So it's a go for me.
Yes,
Bubba.
It was a warm ocean on a cold night. It was that.
Oh, what about a cold ocean on a warm night?
No, that sucks. Because then you swimming in the cold. You don't want that.
Iceberg right ahead.
No, it was good. I hadn't played a game with a lot of people in a very long time, and it was very nice. It was very nice playing. I liked it. Yeah, I truly enjoyed it. I could play it again.
So there's our ramblings about Pan Am.
Booyah.
Gonna go on to our topic that Gabi ham-fistedly come up with, which he posted in our your topic regarding what makes a classic. Have you already forgot that?
Oh, we're going to that now.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that
now. Okay, I'm ready, bro.
Okay,
hey, but before you go there,
okay, I won't go there. What?
Before you go, I said before you go there. Did you know there are computers for the Amish which have no internet, videos, or music? Or from what I can tell, as far as the Amish are concerned, electricity.
Are those little things that you stick, like those little kaleidoscope things that you stick the little rails in, like when you're kids, the little binocular-looking things? What are they?
I don't know. It's like computers for the Amish. So basically, somebody just developed a scam to give their broken computer to the Amish. Like, here you go.
There's no such thing.
Edition.
There is
$20.
No such thing. There is no. Okay, who says this?
BestLifeOnline.com. It says Amish people tend to reject modern ways, but despite that, there is still a computer made specifically for the tech-wary group. I didn't think they were tech-wary. I thought they just didn't accept it at all. The key selling point, perhaps not surprisingly, is all the things the computer doesn't do, according to NPR. That's a legit source. No internet, no video, no music. If you don't have no video, how can you see what's on the screen? Isn't that a video screen?
No, I think they mean like it doesn't have like a video codec, so it can't like play video. So if you
They're not zooming.
you can't upload. Yeah, you can't upload something and then play a video on it.
It says, in general, the Amish are more willing to adopt new technology if they justify it for business reasons and they can keep it out of the home. Keep it out of the home? So it's basically like a calculator in their barn.
Well, I think they use it for like word processing stuff and all that. Like,
That's right.
So they have a printer and all that.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, they don't keep it in the home. It's weird. They don't keep it in the home. I shouldn't say it's weird.
Bartholomew is sneaking out to the barn reading 50 Shades of Grey on the little 8-bit computer screen. Yeah, that's exactly right. The Amish computer.
Even Ezekiel said I was losing my mind.
Please don't be doing Weird Al Yankovic.
Please don't.
Okay.
Do that.
I don't know if that's all the banter I can handle
Amish.
from that. You
like
just
the
save the
Amish.
rest of your banter. Save the rest of your
Did
banter.
you know clams have feet?
Yes, they do. And they're cold. Get it? They're clammy.
That's why none of them get married.
So, Gabi asked the question, what's the newest board game you would call a classic? I'm sorry, I'm still laughing about that.
That was the topic?
Thing.
I thought it was just what makes it a classic.
Yeah, well, I thought that myself. I kind of put a spin on it. What makes it a
Okay.
classic?
I got you.
He asked, how long does it have to be, for the
either or.
classic moniker? So, when I got to thinking about classic games, Frankie of the North, of course, commented that it would be Lords of Vegas, and I would tend to agree with him. But does the age of the game, does a game have to have staying power? I threw out that I would consider it, if a game is around for 10 years or more, then it can be called a classic if it's still relevant. And that's just my own opinion on that. This is really so subjective because people call Catan a classic.
I think that's the thing. I believe when it comes to board gaming, it's probably subjective because I was looking up cars. Like with cars, at least according to Google, there's kind of a hard date. Like it's like 20 years, it's a classic. So many years, it's vintage. So many years past that, it's like classified as antique. So there's like a set date, apparently, in years. But as far as board games, it can't be years gone by. It's a classic. I mean, there's some games like that, like Monopoly. I mean, it's a classic, even though gamers such as ourselves and most hobby gamers, we don't like Monopoly.
Yeah, but I would.
That doesn't keep it from being a classic. But you know what I'm saying.
So I'm not proposing that a game just because it's old is thus a classic. I'm saying that if the game is old and still relevant, and I put the time of 10 years, if a game after it goes past 10 years, if it is still relevant, if it's still actively being played, then it's a classic.
But let me put this on you then.
Okay, put it on.
Can I lay this on you?
Go ahead.
Let me lay some games on you that have been since then.
Okay,
Some game. You gonna lay
Castles
some
of Burgundy.
it's a classic. Nobody would argue
2011, 9 years.
that. Okay, well, it will be a classic in a year.
Viticulture.
It's not a classic.
You don't think so? 2015.
By the strict definition of this is you call this the Jerry Baker rule. It's got to be older than 10 years. The Jerry Baker law.
But that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. This is according to you.
I know, but here's the thing: where did the car industry come up with these dates that you Googled them from?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know. What happened is some guy somewhere set a rule, and that became an industry standard. It always begins with somebody yelling out loud, "This is what I think, and this is the rule that I go by."
So are you saying then Castles of Burgundy, because it's 9 years and not 10, is therefore not a classic?
Yes, I'm saying that.
I would think you're incorrect.
Why?
I think if you boil it down, I will bypass everything else I was going to say and then get back to it. I will say if you boil it down, it comes down to mass public perception. If enough people in the hobby say it to be so, it can be so. Or if the lead personalities in the hobby have declared it so, people will just follow that. Castles of Burgundy is everywhere. Everyone claims it's like the best failed, the basic failed, the intro failed.
Okay.
Everyone agrees on Castles of Burgundy. Oh, it's a classic.
Okay. Can I and I'll argue your point here, and here's why it's dangerous. This is why you have to have a timeline. You have to have a fixed date, much like the car industry, that says if a game stays relevant for X many years, it is thus considered a classic. So, using your example, Castles of Burgundy, it's 9 years old. Who is to say that this year a game is released, maybe by Stefan Feld, maybe by somebody else, that does everything that Castles of Burgundy does better and kills it? Like literally all the classic people.
You can't use that though.
What do you mean? Why can't I use that?
That's not a barometer, because what game has take this Catan.
Okay.
Classic. We would all agree Catan is probably the classic, right?
Right.
What did we just say for our next podcast? What did we just say about Ragusa? I would say it's better than Catan.
Right.
Does that mean Catan is therefore not a classic anymore?
No, but nobody is stopping playing Catan to play Ragusa.
I am.
I know,
I haven't played Catan in years because I've found games better. That doesn't mean it's still not a classic.
Well, you haven't played Monopoly. I mean, here in
You're making my point. Yes.
No, I don't think you understand. There are tournaments of Settlers of Catan. There have been tens of millions of copies of Settlers of Catan played. Just because you have not played it in so many years is not discounted as a classic. My point being is, if a game is relevant after a certain point of time, to which that it is no longer printed or no longer actively played, or there is no longer a community, then it is not a classic. I would argue that when Castles of Burgundy hits its 10-year mark, people will still be playing Castles of Burgundy. I think people will still be playing Castles of Burgundy for quite some time because it is very much considered to be a classic, just like Catan, just like many other games. What I'm saying is that a few years back, I think many of the industry would declare several games to be classic for which nobody plays right now. That they have
Splendor.
I think Splendor, and here's the deal. This is why this needs to be decided and agreed upon by the industry standards. So here's the thing. I would argue that by the time Splendor is like, 4 years old?
Yeah.
By the time that Splendor, 2014. So
okay,
yes,
so 6 years old.
So I would argue that by the time it rolls around 10 years old, you can look back and see, are people still playing Splendor? Is it still being produced? Is it still being sold? Is it still something that people are actively in the community talking about? Thus, it is either going to be one of two things. Much like with movies, you have classics and then you have cult classics. You have shows that are not popular but still have a cult following. Splendor will have a cult following just because of the poker chips and because there are just people with weak bloodlines that need an easy game to play.
They like them chips?
They like them chips.
Are you not saying, though, that essentially it comes down to a popularity? I don't like anybody phrasing the word classic in terms of longevity or length of time. Here's why I say that. Classic.
Oh, snap.
Classic.
Finally, an opposing viewpoint to Jerry.
Well, no, and I'm not trying to have one just to have one. I'll say this.
No, do it, Bubba. Go.
Classic.
You're on my side.
It's classic because it is a defining, it's the highest, quality in that category. So that's why and I'll use the analogy, not of cars, because I think that if you really look at it, classic, and they started to differentiate that only because of value and people wanting to buy things and so forth and so on. So it was a monetary value to that. Classic is more along the lines of books and novels. A novel can be a classic, though it may be unpopular or it may not be popular anymore, but it's a classic because it started a new genre or did something significant within a genre that was just mind-blowing. So if you think like crime novels did not exist until a guy started writing about another guy named Sherlock Holmes, and that started a whole new genre of mystery. You have transcendentalism that Faulkner wrote about. It changed the way people thought of writing about nature and connecting it back with human beings. It was the first of its kind. So it was classic in that it was the first, or it heightened something different. So when I think of classic in terms of board games, I think, what is a classic board game that made other board games possible, or made such an impact that it changed a mechanism or a thought process or how people saw a game? So like you could say Settlers of Catan was a classic. Now, I'm not saying that it is. I think that it is, but because it was, apparently it did something that brought a lot of people to the board game arena. So what did it do? Well, that makes it a classic. So that's how I think of it. A classic could be something that's made now, could be something 40 years ago. I just bought a board game online, Axis and Allies, because I'm told that it was a classic because it had something different about it. It's a war game. How many war games are there? I don't know why it's a classic, but that's what I was reading that it was. So I purchased it. So it's that's what I would say. I don't quantify things by time, because somebody could write the new great American novel that is a classic today, and it truly changes everything, and it is a classic. But you want to use books as an analogy. That's my analogy. When Kill Mockingbird came out, it was an instant classic, even though it was brand new. I mean, you can keep going on and on of examples of that. So that's just me. I could be wrong. I don't think in terms of time, though. That's just me. I think in terms of quality.
That's what I was in the process of looking up what makes things classics. Books was one of the things that popped up. And this one writer was like, are classics defined by the ability to stand the test of time, or is it less about time and more about just the sheer number of people playing the game?
Yeah,
I think
so. The quality could be lacking. So you could say, relate that to, you could relate to movies too, but there are some movies considered classics that by critics and even the audience are like, yeah, that was dumb. It was poorly made, but we still enjoy it. Dude, Where's My Car? Whatever. I mean, Apple Dumpling Game. There's lots of things that are like, yeah, they're kind of dumb.
I mean, the Bible is a classic, but nobody. I mean, how many people actually read it? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it is a classic.
Well,
I mean, it's a classic by any definition. But ask the question, why is it classic? Well, it's super popular. But nobody, I mean, not nobody, but a lot of people in the world just don't read it.
The number one selling book.
It's the number one selling book of all time. And yet ask people, how many people have sat down and read it? Completely.
So, well, true. I mean, that goes, well, that's what I'm saying. Like Twilight, go to Twilight. Like that's probably one of the most massive books of all time. Yeah. So it probably had more eyes on that book than many other, even classics.
I am so
Team
Edward.
Make Twilight a classic?
Well, then you get into
he's gorgeous.
Then you get into the problem you get in with but to prove I'll say this on Jerry's point. Sometimes,
oh man,
a board game can be a classic board game and yet not be promoted well, have very few printings, so forth and so on, and it still be a classic. And that means that people may not have heard of it. A lot of people may not play it, but it could still potentially be a classic, simply because it came out so long ago and its age and it's still there, it's still around. So if you have a board game that got very little production, got very little fanfare, and yet was a hit board game and is still surviving to this day, maybe still without fanfare, maybe still without a lot of promotion, wouldn't that be a classic though? Because it's still surviving. So I don't know. Something to think about.
I'm gonna have to give a bit on my standpoint here, because I think I may have been what we're talking about in terms of. I think just edit everything else out I said. I think what Bubba's point is, and I think this clarifies very well what people might think when they say classic. It's really a battle of definitions.
Yes.
So from Bubba's standpoint, a classic is something that influences the industry. It doesn't matter if it sold 10 copies or 10 million. If it caused the industry to shake things up, it's a classic. Its impact on the actual industry. My standpoint of a classic is a game.
What about my standpoint?
Is relative. You didn't have one. I did too. I have no clue what
dare you. Oh, Bubba gets on here. You instantly leave me behind for Bubba. As always. I see how it is.
New phone. Who dis? No, I'm just saying is that your standpoint was basically if everybody likes it, it's a classic. Am I not? If I were to encapsulate,
well, I said what it boils down to is yes, it's the public. The public will decide if enough people say it's a classic.
So let me reword that for you. If the uneducated mob decides that this is a classic game, then So by your standpoint, let me list some games for you that sold very well that would be a classic, for which you hate. So Wasteland Express delivery service is a classic. Let's see what else.
No, I didn't say sold very well.
I didn't say sold very well. I'm saying by the critics,
classic.
By the critics, that is the classic pickup and delivery game. It is the pinnacle of pickup.
I'm talking about people literally saying this game is a classic. Terra Mystica, would you call that a classic?
You're just getting bogged down into terms, which you're just saying.
I'm getting bogged down by semantics, actual semantics.
Yes, and
if enough people call Castles of Burgundy is a classic because of what it does, who it's made by, everybody that plays it likes it. Enough people call it a classic.
No.
I'm not saying sold well. Otherwise, Uno would be the number one game of all time.
No. You said that if the people in the industry call it a classic, you have two competing.
Nobody called Wasteland Express a classic when it first came out. That's dumb.
Well, nobody called Castles of Burgundy a classic when it first came out either.
I know that, but what do most people call it now, 9 years later?
I know. If you'd quit interrupting me, I'd tell you. It takes time. It takes time, which is to my argument.
But it's only 9 years, not 10.
I'm just saying. My point being, with Bubba's point being, is that a game that is classic, how does it affect the industry? So I would say that, to my point, what I was thinking of a classic was more along the lines of its relevance over a period of time. I would actually say that my misuse of the word classic is more about Hall of Fame. It's more of, is this game able to, and I don't think that's what people mean when they call it a classic. They're thinking of a game that truly has, and I think that's the definition that we have to clarify. There are many games that, using Bubba's definition of classic, something that affected the industry, Splendor would be a classic because it did affect the industry. Look what Century Spice Road went out and did 3 times in a row. Look what many games tried to emulate off Splendor. You can take several games that were instant classics because right after them, everybody came out. I mean, just look here recently with Welcome To. The first roll and write that we had for a long time, Welcome To, opened the floodgates to all these horrible roll and write games that we're going to have to put up with for quite some time. So, I mean, by that definition, Welcome To affected the industry in such a way that it is, by definition, according to Bubba, a classic. And I would agree with that. I think I would have to adjust my term to be when a game has stayed relevant for 10 years or more, it's a Hall of Fame classic, so to speak. It's something that has held its own for that long.
Well, I would just say I agree with Bubba in this. Those games, yes, those are, of course, classics. But that goes along with my thing of the public perception. Terra Mystica, that's a classic of board gaming. That's a classic, quote-unquote, heavy style Euro.
Right.
Everybody refers to Terra Mystica. Robinson Crusoe, 2012. That's when that came out. 8 years ago, not 10. That's a classic solo game, according to most people.
No, see, this is where you're getting. This is where you're.
Lords of Waterdeep, 2012. One of the classic worker placement games, 2012. 8 years ago.
I'm not.
It's not 10.
You're making
people. Lords of Waterdeep is, every time you mention worker placement, Lords of Waterdeep is one of the top, if not the top one mentioned in that genre.
Right, but is it?
So could you say this? Let's say somebody just started playing board games 5 years ago, another person 10 years ago, another person 15, another 20. And if you ask them, man, what is this classic worker placement game that, like, man, you think of every time? I think if you could say, if each one can say, oh, this, and say the same thing, and that be consistent throughout all those years, I would call that a classic if you want to use time as a measurement for that. Or because popularity is a thing. Popularity may last 5 years. Popularity is generational. So for the last 10 years, that's one generation. So this one generation may absolutely love this game, but does it transcend to the next generation or the generation prior? Then I would give it more credence of being a classic game. I'm not denying that it may be classic for our time period. I think it's a valid point, Gabi. I'm just saying, if you want to be a sustained classic over a period of time, if you want to use time as a measure, it means it has to have a sustaining power and be that way to each generation of them going, dude, that's the game to play right there. 20 years ago, game to play. 5 years ago, game to play. That's me. Could be wrong. What do I know?
I think in most terms, that's true. But things, as you come into the hobby, you're going to stop playing certain games. When I came into the hobby, my first game was Catan. And I came into the hobby relatively late, 7-8 years ago. Catan,
it's not a hobby for me. It's a lifestyle.
It's still kind of popular. But now I haven't played Catan in years. That doesn't mean I don't recognize it. Lords of Waterdeep is a classic to most people. They play it as a break-in worker placement type game. Android Netrunner 2012 CCG. There was Magic the Gathering. There was Android Netrunner.
Okay, yeah. So what I don't understand your point. I mean, yeah.
I'm telling you, your definition of setting a time marker on it does not apply.
I'm saying that every other industry does it.
Yeah. True.
And so
okay.
You
can't compare one industry to the next.
Yeah. Okay. Let me no.
Board gaming is a hobby of hotness, and for you to last even a few years is amazing.
Okay.
Is board game years like dog years?
Yes, exactly.
I think that the hobby as a whole would be served better if it was not. Thus why I am a snob, and thus why every other industry, such as the Rock Hall of Fame, 25 years, such as classical cars, such as all of these things, are marks of the industry maturing and going for something
so what governing body in board gaming is going to declare what defines the years, whatever, behind classics? That's what you're asking to happen. Then you're asking for some sort of governing body in board gaming, whether it be Board Game Geek or the Dice Tower, whoever the biggest people are, to form a people and say, okay, this is what we're going to define as a classic. Da 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 da.
Right, which is how every industry does it. You have a group of experts, not the mob of who have these goldfish level attention spans, for which they go out and they say, this game has obviously influenced the industry. This game came out. We started making board games like this game. That sold very well when we emulated these mechanics. This game caused this. And by the way, this game is X many years old. I'm not saying it has to be 10. I'm just using that as a metric of saying this is how long this game's been out. And even to a degree, it's still relevant. I mean, look at Stone Age. The Stone Age Anniversary Edition came out. People bought it. Stone Age is still a relevant game. And by all rights, many people will call it a classic. Now, has that game been killed? Very much so. I'm saying is, without... Can
I give you another example?
You've given so many. I don't need...
Let me give you another one.
Okay.
The year 2015. Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
Right.
Kicked off this whole legacy thing.
Yeah, and it's a classic.
5 years ago.
And no, you're
this is what I'm saying. You're trying to put a year on it of 10 years.
I'm not trying to put a year on it. You're completely missing the point.
Hold on. So then you're saying you think someone should put a year on it.
Here's what I'm saying. And everything I'm about to say.
Okay, but go ahead. Before you go on, 5 years ago, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, I would say that's a classic because it triggered this whole legacy thing.
Right.
Code Names 2015.
Okay.
Time Stories.
But here's
Seven Wonders Duel.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that you're not considering, that you're absolutely not considering. What does it take to be able to evaluate something's effect on the industry? What's the one thing it takes?
If it's replicated.
And which takes time.
It's true.
So, in 2015, nobody called Pandemic Legacy a classic. Now, 5 years out, we're already looking back and going, look how many legacy games have come out in just that short period of time. It's obvious that this game is probably going to be a classic. Yeah, it's a classic by this standpoint. We can see, however, that there are some games that take a little longer to really catch on. I would say that when you have games such as, like
Wingspan.
Like Wingspan. So is Wingspan a classic? I wouldn't say it is.
That was my next question. Can there be an instant classic?
No. By this definition, by both definitions that we have here, by Bubba's definition and by my definition, no, there is no such thing as an instant classic.
I agree.
No, you don't. You don't agree. You spent the last 30 minutes arguing the fact that if the mob says it's a classic and enough people say it's a classic, then it's a classic. Bubba started off by saying you have to be able to tell whether or not it's influential. I started off by saying, is it relevant? Each of these things takes time. There is no such thing as an instant classic, no matter what the industry says.
Well, I'll say this, which I agree with you 99.8%. The only reason why I say that is this. At times, there is always an exception. And then I'll use a bad analogy, and I know it's bad because it's a sports analogy. But you have someone
We're going back to Twilight. Go ahead.
Like a Dr. J or a LeBron James or a critical one,
classic,
or a critical one, a Michael
Jordan. He's still playing
because when they came into the league, their first year coming, especially Michael Jordan, he changed fundamentally how basketball was played. His first year in the league, he changed how the game was played. He was phenomenal. I mean, like he literally connected the generation of old to the new. People still play the way he plays basketball, his style. Kobe Bryant replicates that. LeBron James didn't get to be what LeBron James is until he added to his game like Michael Jordan. And Michael's been retired for years. So 99.8% of the time, I agree with you. I think it is possible to create a game that creates a sea change almost immediately when it comes out. Has that happened yet? I don't know. Will it happen? Maybe so. There is that possibility that a game could come out and on day one be a significant sea change in the industry, and then in my respects, that would be a classic. But as I said, that is a rarity. 99.8% of the time, you need a little bit of time to figure that out. That's me.
Well, each year along those lines, I would say each year. I say each year. I hadn't really been paying attention to it that long since we're doing a podcast. 3 years in a row since we started this podcast, I would say like the number one game when we first started was probably Pandemic Legacy, right?
Mm.
Right.
After that, Gloomhaven sweeps the awards. Everybody's talking about it. Ranked number one on BGG. This year, Wingspan sweeps the awards. Everybody's talking about it. It's ranked number 20 on BGG right now. There's always a standout game that possibly every year, and it can be called an instant classic, and years down the road, people are talking about it right now, years down the road, it may hold up to that actuality, but I mean, obviously we don't know. In 10 years, are we still going to be talking about Wingspan? We don't know. But for the moment, they are instant classics to some people. I would say I would allow that because Pandemic Legacy Season 1, it's still high in the rankings. People still talk about it. I don't know why. I don't like it. Gloomhaven, it's nonstop. It was only 2 years ago? I mean, it's just an onslaught of Gloomhaven stuff. And now Wingspan's the new darling.
Well, and I think that you're conflating the two terms, though. Just because something is hot right now does not make it a classic. People saying something is a classic does not make it a classic.
I'm not talking about just general hotness. There's lots of games that are hot. I'm talking about these games that are like the cream of the crop of that year.
I'm saying that. I'm saying that just because a game is popular, that just because a game has sold the most copies does not make it a classic. As Bubba was talking about how it affects the industry, how does this game actually cause the industry to make changes in either its design or production? I would argue that you put out two good examples. One being, well, actually three good examples: Gloomhaven, Pandemic Legacy, and Wingspan. Pandemic Legacy showed us that people will tear up a board game. It shows that people enjoy a continuing story. And so in that realm, by that definition, it's a classic. Gloomhaven proved that people will wait, pay a lot of money for a ridiculous Kickstarter, and do a campaign-style, D&D-style game. And so, yeah, it caused there to be more games similar to that. Wingspan, although very popular and an excellent family game, I just borrowed your copy of it and played it with my kids. It's a great game. I enjoy it. I actually enjoyed it more than what I recalled. What does Wingspan change? Nothing. What has Wingspan done for the industry? Well, in terms of actual production values and things of that nature, I mean, everybody knows people like shiny things. Did it confirm people's love of bird eggs? Does it confirm people's loves of birds? It just took standard mechanics and made them more accessible, and made it a very nice, very clean family-style game that is actually a very decent game. I would hesitate to call Wingspan a classic simply because I don't know what it has influenced in the industry. Given time, it may show that it did cause some great amount of influence somehow that I'm just not seeing right now. But right now, I would not call it a classic.
Okay, I would argue, and I feel like we're arguing against each other. We're all thinking somewhat this. I will say that after my other thought, I think Wingspan is great for now because as Catan was to its generation, Wingspan might be to this generation and start a whole new entry class of gamers.
And that will take time to tell.
Right.
Like I was saying.
But what I am saying,
and I was right.
But what I am saying that you tend to diffuse, no matter how you tried, a classic is not called a classic unless people are calling it a classic. It's that simple. That's what I'm saying.
No.
If people...
No.
It's literally comes down to the people, Jerry.
No,
if
it doesn't.
Nobody calls something a classic. Are you yourself going to declare that some book or movie or game that only you played and loved, Jerry Baker calls this book a classic? I never heard of it. Nobody else has ever heard of it. Therefore, it's only a classic to you. Classics are defined by the public, whether you like it or not. Yes, they are.
They're not. They're defined by their influence. And you're mistaking the public's influence and the public's opinion. And
you are correct in that point. But if no one else ever calls it that,
I'll give you.
Then it's not a classic.
No. You keep missing the point. You have to.
You're missing the point. You're missing the point.
There is a dichotomy between the public and the industry. So here's a fine example in terms of movies. And I'll use a movie for which I have the utmost respect for and a one that you can't sit through, Blade Runner. That bombed.
Cult classic.
No. Classic.
Classic.
No. You can look it up. No.
I'm telling you, it didn't become a classic until it came out on video. Nobody liked it.
But it is a classic. Because of its influence, it bombed. It held that
it's
cult.
It's a classic to you.
No, it's not. It is a classic. It is voted by the industry standards of one of the most influential science fiction film of all time. And any director and writer, visual artist, soundtrack, everybody will argue that film, although it bombed, although nobody watched it, it took 15 years for it
So
to
are you going to
finally
say
become.
in 10 years, if Cry Havoc suddenly becomes the game, you're going to agree it's a classic,
Yes.
even though it sucked?
No, so in my opinion, Cry Havoc didn't do anything, but what you're setting up a straw man argument. I'm saying is that
You're a straw man.
is that Blade Runner in the film
What does that
industry,
even mean, setting up a straw man argument?
it means you're setting up an argument that nobody's making so you can knock it over easy.
yeah, that's what I'm best
You're
at.
setting
I know
yourself
you-
up for success in a conversation.
Yeah.
Well, who else can I beat except myself?
Well, you're beating the scarecrow to death. I'm saying is that the industry, not people, decide what a classic is. You're just saying that if enough people call something a classic, then that's the case. That's not the case. A classic, you're not differentiating between popularity and actually industry standards. And so I think that's what we're going to have to realize is that we are all thinking of three different things.
Yes.
I would argue that Bubba actually had in his mind the definition of a literary classic.
Literal.
Of an actual classic, of how that's defined by it being changing, by its influence on culture and the industry, not popularity, which was your definition of popularity.
That's what I would say.
Which is wrong.
Because that would go to. I understand that. I understand.
You understand
in
that you're
general,
wrong?
I understand that the mob mentality in general may be incorrect, but if you're going to go by movies, and I will back this. Citizen Kane is like often regarded as the classic movie, like the number one movie. I hate that movie.
Okay.
And the general public that watches that movie hates that movie.
movie.
They'd rather go for Marvel Avengers than
Right.
Citizen Kane.
And again, you're not understanding. It's not the popularity
I
of
know.
the video. It is the effect.
But you can have a certain amount of people call this thing a classic, but the general populace will disagree.
All right. And again,
I think you
Bubba,
got it,
just
but
straighten him out. He's not listening.
I'll say
Just straighten him
this.
out. Punch him, Bubba. Punch him.
If you take off, you don't use the literary example, because here's the thing with
I think with
popularity.
each industry, it's different.
Well, no-
you can't apply one industry to
well,
another.
no, I'll say this just for the human condition. We'll put it that way. Is if you
Snap,
have
we're going global.
if you have something, I'll use this example, but don't think of it as an industry. Think of it as the human condition. Van Gogh, probably one of the most popular. We know Van Gogh, even though none of us know
Why
art.
does Bubba always got to be
None
like
of us
super
know-
smart about everything.
Yeah, well, none of us know art, but we know Van Gogh's name. But yet Van Gogh didn't sell any of his paintings. I think he sold like one. Wasn't popular. Nobody cared about him. In fact, his paintings didn't become classic until decades after he had already passed and they were already
He
out in
died
the world.
broke.
Yeah, he died
Barely.
broke.
And
He died
missing an
broke.
ear.
So now, and what happened is people started seeing this thing and they said, oh, that's crap because it didn't match the standards of the time. And then they recognized that the way he drew it was visionary. So they recognized the quality and the skill and recognized that he changed the way art was perceived. Now, here's the human condition. Now he became popular. So that's why popularity sometimes doesn't fit. That can work in the opposite way. You can take something that is super popular, as our day and time represents it. Like, let's say, super popular.
Twilight, baby.
Well, I'll use
which is not popular anymore.
well, I'll use-
Avengers.
No, I'll use an even far back classic. Let's say that when it came out, it was a classic. 2 movies, Casablanca, Lonesome Dove. And yet, in our day and time, right now, 2 movies, no longer popular. So why
Hey, Bubba,
popularity change?
guess what?
So popularity,
Guess what?
Go ahead.
I just watched Casablanca for the first time ever.
Did you? Yeah, but you've always known that it existed, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Of
like
course.
every quote from, I was watching it. I was like, this is still a really good movie.
Yes.
And then I was like, wow, like every line in that movie is like iconic.
It's iconic. People use it all. It's in other movies. So you know the movie even though you've never watched it. And here's the thing. You know Van Gogh when you see it, even if you don't know that that's what he does. When you see a picture that's blue with stars and a sun on it, you know that's a Van Gogh. That's one of his most popular paintings.
I prefer Van Stock.
Well, of course you do. I mean, it makes sense. So here's the thing about popularity. That's why it is a poor indicator of quality.
Right.
You are.
And so that's why I don't pronounce it Van Gogh or
Van Gogh.
yeah, because that's the closest to the Dutch pronunciation actually. But that's the point being is that the time that it takes to realize something's worth, it's difficult to quantify. And by definition, as Gabi's going on about the industries and you can't judge the industry, we're not going by the industry. We're going by the strict definition of classic. A classic is something that exemplifies this item in its class. It exemplifies the quality of its class. And so when we think of anything that's of different mechanics or different styles of board games, does it exemplify its mechanics to such a degree that it is a classic? It shows it in such a way that people in the industry recognize that this is influential, not just regular standard people. And so the argument of popularity is moot. There's no reason to argue because something is not popular, it's not a classic, or something that is popular thus must be a classic. It boils down to, how does this thing affect its environment? How does it affect its industry? Does it cause waves? Does it make changes? Is it something that when people think of its particular style, is that what comes into mind? And just like how Van Gogh changed the art world, are there particular games that changed the industry? And I would argue that yes, there are. And that to give other games chances, one simply needs to have an open mind and perhaps assign a time limit of saying, okay, look at this game and see exactly where we stand in this X amount of time to see if it affected the industry, and thus it may be considered a classic. Like Castles of Burgundy, I would argue that even though my subjective opinion on it is that it is a classic, what did it change? What effect did it have on the industry? It was a popular game, but really what mechanics did it carry over, and what mechanics did people emulate, other designers, other companies? What really did Castles of Burgundy accomplish? And even though I think it's a classic,
dice assignment.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this one last thing because and against this notion of popularity, a classic is, does it make an influential change in something?
correct.
Hitler is a classic. He changed the way strongmen or way dictators operate in a nation. He is a classic representation of something. In fact, people say this person took over this country. It's it's like he's Hitler, Mussolini. There's a reason why they say that. So there's the reason. A lot of times we refer to popularity. It is what people like. Well, you can be popular and people dislike it. And so a classic is what changed it. And I'm not in any way advocating, Hitler and what he did. But he is I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you for that.
I want to throw that out there. But just on the definition of classic, he changed fundamentally how people take over countries. He fundamentally changed even people, and that's sad. Even people in Russia learned from Hitler. And that's sad that Russians learned from a German. I mean, it's crazy because they've been doing it for a while. So, I mean, and that is a very broad statement, by the way, before I get into trouble. But you just got to look at that definition of it. Of anytime popularity comes into something, that's problematic. But that's
you got to stop watching that History Channel, man.
That History Channel is
on there.
History Channel 1 and 2 is my favorites.
I can't. You talk to Bubba about anything, he's on there talking about the loose Fonza or something. He watches too much history.
I only watch Disney Plus.
Oh, anyways, I think we've settled.
Mandalorian is a classic.
That's an argument.
I think we have settled the argument here of the classic, so. And I think that we have all agree that I favor
that Bubba was right.
No, I could be wrong.
I favor Bubba's definition of classic more than mine. I think I'm thinking more of Hall of Fame. But I do believe that, as a caveat, part of what I said regarding the time, it does take time for a game.
Part of what I said was right.
I'm saying that per definition.
Well, I'm about to say, if you look up, you Googled classic during the course of this podcast just so you'd be right.
Well, I think to Jerry's point, a Hall of Fame is when enough people recognize the degree of change that a board game created. or any field, when enough people recognize it, then it becomes a Hall of Fame. Then popularity matters very much, by the way, because it becomes a popular
So we're
thing.
all right. So basically what you're saying is all right. All right,
Well,
let's go and do it for this episode.
I'm just saying the bedrock of the logic has to be something, but it incorporates as you build the house, everybody's point of view. It's just really what matters.
I didn't look up much. I did look up Rock Hall of Fame inductees, and I was pleased to hear that Whitney Houston was inducted in 2020.
She wasn't.
And apparently...
if you had looked up Rock Holler of Fame, that would have been me.
And apparently a group called the Notorious B.I.G. was also inducted.
A group named that? Yeah, of course. You're right about that.
So...
Everybody should have known because it was notorious.
It was notorious.
But how could they be Hall of Fame if they were notorious? It makes no sense.
Because
all right, well that's going to do it for this episode.
Man. Thanks for having me.
That was very well. Oh, Bubba's out.
No, I'm good.
Bubba, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you being here.
Not a problem. My pleasure.
So that you provided a third and correct view of the opinions discussed.
Well, I'm looking forward to the opinions of people who hear it and see what they say.
I don't really care about what other people's opinions are.
He doesn't care about popular opinion, obviously. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for coming on, Bubba. Thanks for coming on, Jerry. As the foundation and cornerstone of this show, I'll say that's going to do it. And until next time, I'm Gabi.
Mm-hmm. That's Jerry.
I'm Bubba. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Board Game Snobs. Stay classy.